Okay, so Bezras Hashem, we're continuing with our shir on Likkutei Moharan, and thank you to tonight's sponsors for the shir. We're going to be looking at Torah Chaf Hey in Likkutei Moharan Chelik Aleph, and the reason we're looking at this teaching is because with the Zohar Kadosh of today's parsha, we're focusing on imagination and the element of Sarah, Ruach HaKodesh, that gets buried within the Afar, which is the imagination and the imaginative principle that rests wedged between the darkness that is below it and the great illumination that is above it, and how Dimyon ultimately is going to be revealed to be betwixt and between judgment. It's going to operate as the central point at which both sides kind of form together to unite themselves together by way of opposition. Dimyon is going to become the most important place, and the place of avoda, the place of bechira, the place of simcha. And so what we're going to see is one of the places that Rabbeinu begins to talk about Dimyon. Rabbeinu speaks about Dimyon in a few places, and obviously with the klalim of Rav Avin ben Rav Nachman, when Rabbeinu is talking about Malchus, he's also talking about Dimyon, and when he's talking about Emunah, he's also talking about Dimyon. So therefore, really, the whole book is a book of imagination, a book of Emunah. But specifically, there are clarifications about the matter of imagination in Torah Ches and Tinyana, in Torah Chafhei, in Likkutei Moharan Chelik Aleph. But really, it's Rabbi Nosson who focuses immensely on the element of Dimyon. Rabbi Nosson, when you look at a mafteach for Likkutei Moharan, or you look for Likkutei Halachos, or you look at just kind of a word search of Likkutei Halachos, you'll find that Koyach HaMedame, the zichuch of the Koyach HaMedame, the clarification of the imaginative principle, the struggle with the imaginative principle, the identification of imagination with the Yetzer Hara, as Rabbi Nachman pointed out, and you see in Rabbi Nosson far more of an emphasis on the utilization of imagination, and it's brought. Rabbi Nosson brings it, as well as Rav Shmuel and Rav Avram ben Rav Nachman brings it, that one of the reasons that Rabbi Nosson was able to be the Talmud of Rabbi Nachman, and he was Musmach al Yedei Rabbi Nachman, he was Yehoshua, the Levana that came to reflect the son of Moshe Rabbeinu and to enter into Eretz Yisrael, which is the place of Dimyon, is because he had a Dimyon Mezuchach. He clarified his Dimyon, and it wasn't through the work of his own hands that led him to clarify his Dimyon, but it was the gift that Rabbeinu gave him to be able to be Mezachich his Dimyon, to allow himself to be Medam and Milsa Lemilsa, to allow himself to trust the creativity and the creative flow of his orientation towards the Torah. That was the reliance that Rabbi Nosson had. He knew that his Medame was Mezuchach, and that it was not caught up in the Heichali Hatmuros or the Irbuvia or the admixture of clarification and fantasy, because the nether side of imagination is fantasy. And when fantasy goes into a person's life, so that's already the repertoire of the Nachash, and that's already no sein tam liftam. And when Dimyon is accessed from the lower perspective, where it becomes a fantasy of sorts, that's already something that breaks a person. And the Chedushay Torah that are rooted in that type of infantile fantasy are not going to be mevura or mezuchach. They're not going to be able to break the hearts of Klal Yisrael, to awaken them to tshuva. And Rabbi Nosson himself had a bir hamadame hamezuchach, and therefore he was able to write clarified teachings. And even though Rabbi Nosson expresses himself so elongatedly, with such length, nevertheless, miraculously in the writings of Rabbi Nosson, you see that no matter how far he's deviating from the point still finds itself wherever the deviation leads you to the degree that you have deviations all over the place, but they're ultimately being revealed to being the exact same thing. You have very few tzaddikim who are able to write like this. The Leshem Shabbat V'Chaloma, the Mittler Rebbe was like this. The Talmidim of the Alter Rebbe, Rav Yitzchak Isaac Hamler, Rav Hillel Paritcher, they wrote with this precision and the center point of the text and the reverberating applications of the text. Again, the yichud of Chachma, which is the point itself, and Bina, which are the reverberating circles and applications, and the width and the length of the text itself. And so we'll look at Rabbeinu. We'll look at what Rabbi Nachman has to say. And Torah Chaf is already, if we look at Rabbi Nachman in Torah Hey, where he makes the distinction between the nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu and the nevuah of Shar HaNeviim. So the nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu is Zeh Hashem Kivinu Lo. It was a direct connection. It was b'marav v'lo b'chidos. It was not a b'chalom adaber bo. It was not rooted necessarily in the imaginative principle that we orient ourselves towards. No matter what, Moshe Rabbeinu was also orienting in a place of Dimyon, but it was an aspaklaria de Nahora. Ho, on the other hand, that some future-oriented vision, clouded vision of something that is not yet present, but I know of its incoming sense. So that's all the other Nevi'im who saw through an Aspaklaria de lo Nuhara, like Avram Avinu by the Akedah, as the Meshiloch points out. And Ko means that's how it's going to be. Ko Yezarecha. I don't know how and I don't know why, but I trust that that's how it's going to be. That's a lower level of Nevuah, which is far more rooted in the imaginative principle, in imagination. So the Torah, we can say, Torah Chafei, which is about the clarification of the Medama, it's much more shaykh to the level of Nevuah of the Shar Nevi'im, which is Ko rather than Zeh. So we can say there's remez here that it's going to be in Torah Chafei. So this is one of the Torahs, it's I believe the second or the third Torah of Rabbi Nachman's teachings on the Gemaras of the Sabbath-Bey Asuna, as brought down in Bechoros, where the Greek wise men and the Socratic reasoning would come and ridicule Chazal for their kind of metaphysical speculation, and ultimately Chazal would hear their claims and respond to them in pithy, kind of ironic statements, which would subvert the attack of Greek wisdom, always really highlighting the fact that faith is rooted in the unknown while wisdom is rooted in the known. And in these Gemaras, Rabbi Nachman builds himself very much like he did in the Mamre Rabba Barachana. Rabbi Nachman is building himself and clarifying these teachings as well, meaning hinging his words on the words of Chazal to reveal that this is Pashat Pshat. Amrulay, they said to Chazal, they said to the Tana, Ach ve'lon mana deloy shavyav lechavala. Bring for us an object that is not worth the damage that it calls. As Rashi says, Hareini kli she'eno shav hahesped shehu mafsid. Bring for me a vessel that is not worth the damage that it causes as a vessel. Asya budya, they brought a machzeles, they brought a floor mat. Velo have aya letara. But it couldn't enter, it was too big for the entryway. Shaya oirich v'rachav yoter min Pesach. It was much longer and wider than the entryway to the door. Amrulay, so he said to them, Aisi Mara, bring for me a hammer. Satro, break down the doors, in order so the mat can fit. So Hainu mana delay shavya lechavala. So we have an object, an item that is not worth the damage that it caused. Meaning the item is the mat, it's not worth the damage that it caused in order for it to be functional, which was the breaking down of the walls. Zakt Rabbeinu, bringing the Mishnah in Maseches Soita, Mishacharev Beis Hamikdash, from the time that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Batal Hashamir, V'noifes Tzufim V'amana. The Shamir worm, mysterious worm substance, depending on the orientation that we're taking in Chazal, that had the unique capacity of breaking through stone that cannot be broken through in any other way. The secret of the Shamir, the secret of the Osios of Rishimu that breaks down to the very irreducible core. The Noifet Sufim and Amana were all mevutal with the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Zak the Heilige Rebbe. Each and every person, to take themselves out of their imagination, and to ascend up to the seichel, up to the intellect. So we see a very clear distinction, separation between dimyon and seichel, imagination and intellectualization. Intellectualization based on fact and provability, and imagination based on the opposite. Because when a person chases after or is drawn after the imagination, is drawn down to the place that the imagination naturally is drawn to, zebechinas shriros lev. This is the notion of just the natural tendencies and the engravings and pathways within the individual's heart, where the natural tendency of dimyon is to draw me down and to allow me to do those things that arise within my heart. Shehu hoylech acher hamedame shebelev. Because naturally, when a person follows dimyon, they get dragged down to the medama shebelev. They get drawn down to the medama that exists within the heart. Now, we said today in the Shir on the Zohar that there's two forms of medama. There's the medama shebeseichel and there's the medama shebelev. There's also the medama shebeguf. There's imagination of the mind, the heart, and the body itself. There's imagination on the level of insight, on the level of emotion, and on the level of action. Imagination is always the last part of each level. So the last part of the mind is imagination, and that gives birth to the heart, to emotions. The last part of the heart is imagination, and that gives birth to habituation. The last part of habituation is imagination as well, in the forms of addiction, etc. And so The medama shebelev is where a person will naturally find themselves drawn. That's the place where it becomes dangerous, in the imagination within the heart. Ukesheyoytze meshriros halev u'meshaber libo ha'even ze bechinas shamir. But when a person has the capacity of overcoming the thickness and the intensity of their heart, which is referred to as a lev ha'even, that unfelt place where a person feels compelled in whatever it is that arises on their hearts. The shamir worm is the thing that breaks through the stone. So anytime a person is able to break through the desires of their lave, and they break their heart of stone, it's the aspect of the shamir there, the aspect of this worm, this substance that can cut through the stone. Sha'al yado nichna ha'evan. Through the shamir worm, through this secret of cutting through the imagination that closes the heart over like stone because it imagines itself to be stuck in its tendencies and its behaviors and its habituation, because at that point we're dealing with the imagination that is much more susceptible to the desires and the brokenness of the body. We have to break it like the shamir worm, and that's how we crush the stone. And at that point, the person is not going to allow the imagination in their heart to give way to the natural tendency to follow after the imagined taivos. Taiva, desire for Rabbeinu, is fundamentally a figment of imagination. As Rabbeinu describes so potently in Sichos Aran, that ketzi dami, meaning what's the dimyon of the Yetzer Hara. And it's like this kind of this jester of sorts that's running through the marketplace. And each and every person is chasing after this jester with the assumption that in the cupped hands of this jester-like creature is the thing that they need most desperately, the thing that's going to answer all of the questions. And when they finally corner, and the craving and the triggers are so strong that they corner this thing and they're ready to get it from its hands, suddenly, poof, this Yetzer opens up its hands and it shows that there's nothing there. That's the koyach of taiva hamaduma, that a person comes so habituated within the imagination of the heart that it descends down into the habituation of the body, God forbid. But when I break free from that, and I'm not hoylech achar taiva samadumos v'hoylech achar aseichel, I follow after my seichel, I follow after the medama in my seichel, my insight, so then I'm going to be okay. And it's like I'm the shamir worm. B'chol zman shelo hoitzi sichlo el hapoel, shelo hishtamish b'sichlo adayin, as etzlo haseichel b'koyach. Afal pi shekvar shavar hamedame. There's two things that have to happen. First and foremost, we have to break free from the medame. Once we break free from the throes of the medame, which keep us enclosed within that space of the heart and the temptations of the body, so then we elevate ourselves up to a place of seichel, where we're able to have the mind to be sholate on the body, to be aware of the imagined nature of the cravings of the heart and the desires of the body. But even though we may have broken the koyach hamedame and we've accessed the seichel, that doesn't mean the seichel has been actualized. Because in truth, there's two levels to the seichel. There's the seichel in its potential form, which has already escaped the throes of the imagination, but that's still prior to the expression of that potential of wisdom, because the application of the potential of wisdom that rests in the mind is a second stage. So you can have it that a person is broken free from the medame and entered into the area of the seichel, but the seichel and the intellectual control that a person has over themselves and the situation still might be operating in a place of potential prior to actualization. So now let's read the words inside. The cholzman shelo hotzi sichlo elap. I'm sorry. So the cholzman shelo hotzi sichlo elapoel. But as long as a person has not allowed their insight, their intellect, their way of thinking to emerge into actualization, meaning shelo hishtamish b'sichlo adayin, that the person has yet to utilize the capacity of their mind to develop an intellectual grasp of reality. It hasn't been applied yet. As etzlo haseichel b'koach. So at this point, the seichel, in spite of the fact that it's still there, it's a real thing, it just hasn't been thought yet. So it's related to as the potential of insight. Af al pi shekvar shavar hamadame. Even though I've already gotten over the first stage, which is breaking free from the taivos of the heart, which dragged me down to the taivos shebaguf, and I've extricated myself from the taivos of the guf, and I've even extended myself beyond the taivos of the heart, and I've reached into the territory of seichel, I still have yet to actualize the seichel itself. The seichel is operating in a place of koyach. And even though afal pisha kvar shavar hamadame, as nitkoimim tchunas sichlo, ki kishazeh kam zeh noifel. Aval haseichel adayin b'koyach. Because what happens is once the dimyon is mezuchach, once a person pushes themselves against the natural tendency to give in to the imagination at the level of the heart, which is fundamentally connected to the imagination at the level of the body, and we enable ourselves to break free from that tendency, so then we're in a clear state where our mind is now beginning to take shape, developing specifically and by way of the negation of the imagination, meaning by repelling the imagination's natural tendency to drag me down towards the more physicalized expression of self, I am already enabling my mind to begin to cultivate itself. Because kishazeh comes zenofel, by way of refraining from being drawn down the natural pathways of imagination, which is from the heart to the body, where I become much more animal. If I free myself from that rapid descent into animal kite that each and every human experiences in the stages of craving and triggers, so then I bring myself up to a place of seichel, but I've yet to actualize the seichel, but the seichel is churning. The engine of the seichel has begun to run, and the potentiation and the emergence of the capacity of insight, of looking differently at reality by way of an affirmative glance, begins to be an option for me, even though I haven't utilized it yet. Ki kishazek kam zenofel, because the dimyon and the seichel, to a certain degree, can be referred to as Yaakov and Esav. The Yaakov is the seichel, and Esav is the dimyon. Now Yitzchak loves Esav, and Yaakov has to pretend to be like Esav. He has to imagine himself and lie in order to be like Esav, because we need that koyach. That's choik of Purim. Yitzchak loves that place. That's where Torah Sheba'al Peh comes from, which is completely rooted in Dimyon, the Kedusha, in the Dimyon HaMezuchach, which becomes a seat for Ruach HaKodesh. And so the comparison of Seichel and Dimyon is also the comparison of Yaakov and Esav. Kishazek comes Zenoifel. When Yaakov is up, then Esav is down, and when Esav is up, Yaakov is down, God forbid. And so too, when Esav is down, which is the Medame, theoretically, so then the Seichel, which is Yaakov, is up. And when the seichel is down, then the madama is up. So we see that the seichel gets cultivated and it begins to churn in a potentiated form. Aval seichel adayin b'koyach, but the insight has not yet emerged, and the mind is still in its potentiation state. V'achar kach, and only afterwards, kishachoyker b'sichlo mishtamish bo, when a person begins to think, and they begin to utilize their mind to create pathways of thinking and orientation, and to see the seichel shebechol davar, azay ha-seichel b'poyel. Then the seichel is b'poyel. So there's seichel b'koyach, there's a potentiation towards insight. Prior to insight, I have yet to create insight about anything yet. But nevertheless, I'm in a state of the potential towards insight, which is a step beyond being stuck in the imaginings of the heart and the body. So there's being stuck in the imagination of the body, being stuck in the imagination of the heart, abstracting myself from the imagination of the heart, entering into the territory of the potential towards wisdom, which means that I'm a Baal Seichel, but yet to have a Haskalah. I've yet to actually apply it. And then there's the process of actually applying the potential form of insight and knowledge, which is the revelation of the neshama, in an actualized way. V'zeh b'chinas noifes tzufim. This is the noifes tzufim. B'chinas noifes totoitfenes soisayich shahoitzi mesiko sichlo mikoyach alapoya. So this Noifes Sufim, I believe it's honeycomb. I believe it's honeycomb. I believe I could be completely wrong in the Manam Aretz, but I don't know exactly what the Mishnah is referring to. Somebody wants to look up and tell me exactly what Noifes Sufim is. It's good. It's good to realize one is an Am Aretz. Someone able to look it up?
How do you spell Noifesifim?
Noifes Sufim is Nun Pei Taf, Tzadi Vav Pei Yud Mem. Mishnah and Sota on Daf Mem Ches.
You repeat Niam Nun Payvuf
Nun Pei
Paytov.
Taf, Tzadi
Yeah,
Vav.
honeycomb. It's honeycomb. Honeycomb.
Honeycomb. Okay, Baruch Hashem, it's honeycomb. Okay, Beseder. So the honeycomb and the shamir fell away. So we know what the shamir means. The shamir is learning how to cut through the medama shebelev in order to ascend back up to the seichel. And the noifetz sufim is the honeycomb, which is the revelation of the koyach to the poel in terms of my seichel. Why is the emergence of my seichel in an applied way out of the pure potential state prior to actualization referred to as a honeycomb? Because it's the bechina of noifes titoifena sifsoisayich, meaning that there's going to be an overflow that's going to flow from your lips. The emergence of the honey from the honeycomb is representative of the emergence of seichel from within its potential state into a state of actualization, where the mind begins to do its work, where the mind begins to cultivate the possibility of finding sweetness in reality. And this is the element of sosayich, shehu b'chinas moitzi mikoyach halapoyel. This is the element of allowing the wisdom that is available to me once I've been mezachich and refined my tendency to get stuck in the lower forms of dimyon. I've extricated myself up from there and I've entered into the place of seichel. And avada, there's a dimyon shebaseichel as well, as we're going to see. But I've extricated myself up from the seichel, from the dimyon of the heart and the dimyon of the body, and I've engaged in the process of dibur, which is the revelation of the koyach into the poel. The achar kach, says Rabbeinu, keshemasig besichlo. So once the seichel has been refined from the medame shebelev, and it's extricated itself from the medame shebeguf, and it's prepared itself to be a state of potential, and then it's actualized itself, and it's emerged into actualization, and it's the emergence of the honeycomb. So then what happens is the seichel goes to the highest place that it can go. The seichel's tendency is to search, and it's a radical assault on the boundaries, to perpetually push out towards the edges of reason, to come to that place where the mind reaches and reaches in the hopes that it will find some element of control, and then it comes to the gvul of the seichel. And at the gvul of the seichel, meaning once a person has reached masha biyad enoishi lahasig, what the mind is capable of grasping in the emergence of its seichel, as sichlo shav seichel hanikne, then the seichel that I am thinking becomes a seichel hanikne, something that is acquired. It is now real. It has reached a point of actualization where instead of just being rooted in the subjectivity of my thought, it has actually become an actual objective experience of connectivity, of actualization. So there's three stages of the seichel. There's the seichel shebekoyach, which is prior to thought, where I am not yet thinking anything. Then there's the process of thinking, which is where the emergence of thought moves out of the potential towards thought and it begins to think. And then once I've found the path in which I am actually going to think about this situation, and it becomes the engraving of my thought and my cognitive outlook, so that's a seichel hanikne. So we have three forms of seichel that the Rishonim and the Kadmonim would refer to is seichel hapoyel, seichel hakoyach, seichel hapoyel, and seichel hanikne, meaning the potential towards wisdom, the process of wisdom, and the actualization of wisdom. These are the three stages that are missing once the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, and we're finding through the teaching of Rabbeinu still are there within each and every one of us. The shamir, when I break free from the medame, the noifes sufim, when I allow my mind to emerge from a state of pure potential into actualization, and the amana, the trustworthy individuals, where does that return? That's going to be with the seichel hanikne, when it's an actualized way of thinking about reality and stamping my mind on that. Like the Choikrim have written, Sheyesh Seichel B'Koyach, Seichel HaPoel, and Seichel HaNikne, the philosophers of thought, of epistemology and analytic philosophical tradition, they see it as three forms of thinking. There's the potential of thought, the process of thought, and the actualization of thought. The ikar kiyumo shel adam la'achar misaso eino ella seichel hanikna. And in truth, the thing that remains with a person even after the process of the body and the heart have stopped functioning, the irreducible part of the self that survives its own death, is the seichel hanikna, that acquisition of thought, the moments of chakika, of actual engraving in the mind, the way that I'm choosing to think. Not all of the random possibilities of thought, the mindlessness of it all, but the times of focus, the tzimtzumim of the machshava, which allow it to be written in the mind. And those things that are written in the mind, those machshavos tovos, and those good thoughts, they go upwards and they're written and they are real. And that is what survives death. That is what marks our continuity in the secret of Tchias HaMesim. And obviously, it's very connected to the Etzem Haluz, which is the irreducible bone of the body, which is also the site of imagination because it rests at the nape of the neck, as Rabbeinu tells us in the Torah of Nachamu Nachamu Ani, which is the point and the bridge and connection between the bottom of the mind, which is the Seichel, and the Medamish of a Seichel, at which point it descends down into the Seichel of Hargasha, which is the Lave itself. So the Seichel HaNikne, that which is acquired, that which becomes real and an actual thought in terms of Kedusha, in terms of functioning, that's the hasharosav la'achar amisa. That's what remains with a person. That's what is actualized. V'zeh amana. This is the element of amana that the Mishnah says was missing after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Ki amana lashon kiyum davar. When something has amana, when something is trustworthy, it means that there's a lasting effect to it, that it's not going to dissipate and it's not going to become unsturdy in its existence. It's not contingent, but rather it's there, it's real. Because the seichel hanikne is that which persists with the individual even after their death, highlighting the fact that there's something that persists. The seichel hanikne nikre. What is a seichel hanikne? What is the tachlis of being mezachich hardimyon, to get to the place of actual thought, where experience of the mind is framing experience outside of me, and there's a yichud between my perspective and reality itself, which is the yichud of kudsha b'richu v'shchinte. And at that place, with kavana, with das, I'm ma'ale those nitzotzos in that place. What does it mean to have a seichel hanikne? Ma sha'adam yodeya harbe devarim biyadiya achas. Zak the Heilige Rebbe, that seichel hanikne, when a person has acquired thought, when a person has actualized a way of thinking, it's so many different thoughts, so many different angles, and so many different vantage points of thinking and various ways of thinking that are all contained and composed and comprised within a singular way of thinking. That I know many, many things in one fell swoop. I know the klal hadvarim. I don't need to enter into the prate hadvarim necessarily to define all of the potential thoughts. It's a way of living with the klal of the thought that contains within itself all of the riboy pratim within it. It's when a person knows many, many things, biyediya achas. Ki koidem sarich leida harbe hakdamois koidem sheyeda ezehu davar. Because in the beginning of thinking, prior to a person encountering the single most point upon which the entirety of the Torah subsists, which is the klal gadol that each person has the ability of grasping, zeh klal gadol b'Torah, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, to find within one's heart, within the dimyon shebelev, the secret of the derech of kamocha mamish, of how to be a tzaddik. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, when a person loves the rava of the heart, when a person loves reyecha, when a person loves the emerging imaginings of the heart, kamoicha, that's the secret of becoming like the tzaddik, kamoicha mamish. That's the secret of each person having the ability to grab hold of their klal in Torah, their nikud in Torah, which the Beis Yaakov writes in his biur on the Sefer HaZohar Kadosh in Tiferes HaChanochi, that each and every person has one klal gadol in the Torah, one thing that's being said. And every vort and every way of Torah and every pasuk and every Mishnah and every Devar Torah and every birur and every sugya that they're learning is just another angle of that particular point. And the sod of their particular parts of, which has its own expression of the kav or in sof, which is the os of Torah of that person. But prior to a person coming to know the entirety of the Torah al regel achas, on one leg, which is what the Gerim really wanted, because in the end of the day, you have to be able to say it on one leg. A person has to be able to have the one thing that represents the entirety, which is Amuna, Bacha Bakuk Vehemed al Davar Achas, Tzadik Bamenoso Yichya. Prior to a person getting to that place of knowing everything within one small thing, a person has to know many, 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 many things. Harbe Hakdamu is Kaidem Shi'ele Eza Davar. Prior to a person coming to understanding anything, a person has to go at it and try and know everything, so that somehow, some way, all of the things that they're learning will merge and morph into a singular thing, which then suddenly becomes the vantage point through which a person is seeing everything. When a person grasps the principle upon which they're going to look at the situation, and that thought that contains many ways of thinking, Then a person throws away all of the introductions, all of the pratim, all of the necessary pathways that lead to that center point of the achdus of it all, the yodeya esadavar biyadiya achas. And at that place, all of the pratim go into the klal and they infuse all of the radical shifting and pleasure that comes about by the movement of the pratim, but it's all nichlal within a singular way of thinking. And a person doesn't need all of the hakdamos. The ikr hama'ayan hachachma min hamikdash yetzei. And the main path of wisdom, the Ma'ayan HaChachma, the Nachal Neveh Makor Chachma, Ikar Ma'ayan HaChachma min HaMikdash Yatza. The Ma'ayan HaChachma is the Bina that comes out of Chachma, which is the beginning of imagination. Imagination, we said, is the edge of the mind. Malchus, which is also Bina, in relationship to Chachma, if Malchus is the feminine counterpoint to Zer Anpin, then Bina is the feminine counterpoint to Chachma, as we see in this week's Zohar Kadosh. That why is it called Maras HaMachpelah? Because what's mechupel is the Os Hey in the Shem Havaya, which represent Bina and Chachma, Ima and Brata, the mother and the daughter. And the emergence of Bina from within Chachma itself is the emergence of the principles of imagination as they begin to emerge at the edge of Chachma itself. And so Ikar Mayan HaChachma, the main flowing forth of wisdom, the Seichel Shebachol Davar, Min HaMikdash Yatza, it comes out from the Mikdash, it comes out from the Makom of the Keser, it comes out from the Makom of Das Pnimi, and Rabbeinu says elsewhere that when a person has Das in the name of Chazal, it's as if they're building the Beis HaMikdash in their days, because the Beis HaMikdash is Das, so the Ikar Mayan HaChachma is emerging from the Pnimius of Keser, which is the Shirish of Das Elyon. Hisham hayu makrivim korbanos. Why does the Ma'ayan HaChachma come from that place? Because we were makriv korbanos. There's two elements taking place in the Beis HaMikdash: Hakravas HaKorbanos, from below to above, and the Hamshacha of Ma'ayan HaChayim, the Chachma, which emerges into Bina, which melts into the mind, which allows the mind to be Masig Moichin. So there's those two elements. And the Ma'ayan HaChachma, the flowing forth of wisdom, is dependent upon the Hakravas HaKorbanos. Why? Because the Hakravas HaKorbanos is Shem HaBahamiyut, the Kayach HaDimyon, animalistic tendency of ourselves, the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov, they're all rooted in Dimyon. It's the Nefesh HaBahamis of a Yid, which is rooted B'tzara Kedusha, but needs to be cultivated and transformed and actualized so that the Dimyon doesn't get stuck in the body or the heart, but can be utilized for the mind to give birth to Chidushei Torah, creativity, being Mahapich Torah into Tefillah, which is the Ikar Chidush in Torah. And so, because we're being makriv, the koyach habahamiyut within us, which is the element of medame, of the heart and the body, which is rooted in the animalistic desires, that the korbanos towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu are in truth the breaking of the spirit, the ruach is the lave. In that place, the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov, in that place of the Dimyon prior to its clarification and its movement above and susceptible to its pollution and its descent below. So it's the offering of a Ruach Nishbara, which is breaking free from the Meduma Shebelev, which is the koyach of the Shamir worm to break through the Lev HaEvan. Sheshviras Hadimyon Hema Karbanos, that the shattering of our lower levels of imagination and the assumptions of our stuckness in accordance with our habituation when our imagination descends down into the body, that in and of itself is the bringing of the korban, which is the prerequisite to being mamshech mayan achayim, to be mezachich the dimyon, to be mamshech moichin mamish. Ubishvil zeh amru chachmenu zachronim lebracha. And for this, Chazal tell us that keshecharev beis hamikdash batel hashamir v'chulei, ukesheyivne beis hamikdash az yekayim uma'ayan min hamikdash yetzei. And this Rabbeinu says all comes to explain what Chazal said, that when the beis hamikdash was destroyed, all of these three things stopped. And when the Beis HaMikdash will return, all of these three things are going to return back again. But what Rabbeinu is teaching us is what we do in the meantime. After Churban Beis HaMikdash, prior to Binyan Beis HaMikdash, instead of waiting idly by and believing the words of the Mishnah to be exhaustive in their external messaging, Rabbeinu says, Adrabah, if the Mishnah is talking about the reality of these things, we know from the Torah's Chacham, Ein Siluk Meichin Olam, no Kedusha is here and then disappears. So if the Shamir was in the world, and the Neifas Sufim was in the world, and the Anshe Amana were in the world, then Mamela, they're still there because there's a Roshem Ein Sofi of anything real in this world. Mamela, they're still accessible. So how are they accessible? The Shamir worm is breaking free from the Madama Shebelev, which is the natural tendency of imagination to assume its rigid stuckness in the body itself, which naturally flows down to the Madama Shebeguf, which keeps us stuck in our habituated actions, which is, in my humble opinion, the roots of addiction itself, which is really just kind of the imagination becoming body. Then we have the Neifes Tzufim, which is once we've clarified ourselves from Madama and the Seichel has emerged into potential state. So we have the Neifes Tzufim, which is the emergence from the Koyach into the Poyel of that Seichel, to the degree that it becomes the Seichel HaNikne, Amana, Riboy Machshavos B'Machshava Achas, which is the secret of the Ma'ayan Min HaMikdash Yetzei, the Shirish of Bina that emerges from Chachma, which only have one singular thought. They're both looking at Keser Elyon Olav Nikra, which is the Shirish of Emuna at every moment, and that is completely rooted in our ability to do the very beginning of the process, which was to break free from the Madama Shebaseichel. This is the tautological unity that Rabbeinu kind of always says. Once a person breaks free from the Madama, then you'll be Zocha to all of these different things. And the Seichel HaNikna is dependent upon the Zichuch of the Koyach HaMadama in order to bring this back down, to give me the ability to be Mezachich my Dimyon more, etc., etc. So let's go weiter, Be'ezras Hashem. Vida, and a person must know, Shebachol Oilam Ve'oilam, Ubachol Madregu Madrega, Yesham Dimyonis Elu. Now, in each and every world and on each and every level, Oilamos and Neshamos and Elikus is what the Baal Shem Tov taught us how to do. That each and every os in front of us, every word of Torah, tefillah, any reality in this Metzias can be seen through the lens of the three things that exist within it at every moment. The Shirish of Elikus, which is the fact that it's all emergent from the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that Simsim is not Kipshuto, and that there's no point in reality that a person cannot bring back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and be Mezachich and be Mekadeshem Shemayim by way of breaking the habit, by way of engaging with the matter, by way of elevating whatever the situation calls for through the process of Hachna'ah, Havdalah, and Hamtaka. Then we have Neshamos, that there are souls, there's work for the soul to do in each and everything. It's not only about connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in that place, which is the Dveikus Shebedavar, but there's also the Birur Hamidos and the Aveda and the Hispainus within each and everything. And then there's the Oilamos, then there's the ontology of the things, the reality of the worlds that the Tzaddikim are poil in, and they're fixing all of the levels of reality. And they're engaging in being Mamshech HaKadosh Baruch Hu more and more. And that's why Rabbeinu was saying here that this is a klal that's true, B'chol Oilam V'Oilam. When you look at Eitz Chaim Kadisha, you'll see this sugya mirrored. It's true in each and every world. And it's also true in each and every madrega, which are states of mind, because it's also true on the psychological level, because Hainu Hach, the Torah is reflective of the soul, and the soul is reflective of the Torah. And just as there are four worlds within Metzias that the Arizal speaks of, five worlds really, but the fifth is composed of all of them and it unifies all of them. There's Adam Kadmon, which rests at the center of all things, going all the way from the top all the way to the bottom, unifying both the world of Atzilus and the worlds of Bri, Yitzir, and Asiya. So you have the five worlds of Adam Kadmon, Atzilus, which is the unity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light without confusion, and even the vessels are mavutal there to the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Then you have the worlds of Bri, Yitzir, and Asiya, which are descending orders of concealment and confusion and lack of clarity that are referred to as the Oilamos HaPirud. In between each and every world, when a person wants to climb up from the world of Asiya and reach the world of Yitzira, so there's going to be a boundary that separates the two of them, which is like a noga, which is like an in-between level where the highest level of the world of Asiya is the Keser, but it's also the Malchus of the world of Yetzira. And that in-between place, that Gesher Tsar Ma'oid Ma'oid, where it's theoretically impossible to jump from one world to the other, it should be impossible. It would be spooky action at a distance. It's impossible from one level to enter into the next level. Elamah, there's a koyach of emuna, that when a person attaches themselves to the emuna and they're able to traverse that narrow place, that halal, which Rabbeinu describes in Torah Samach Dalid, which separates the miloi and the pnimi, I can be ma'avar that, and I can reach the next level. And I can transition from the highest level of Olam Asiya and enter into the lowest level of Olam Hayetzira. Chaver, you're with me? Wow, develop. Beseder. And so what Rabbeinu was saying is that Da shebachol olam va'olam, in between each and every world, and also in between each and every madrega, yesh sham dimyonos elu. There's a level of dimyon, there's a level of something that is not yet refined. It's not yet decided. Dimyon can either go upwards towards the seichel, or dimyon can be drawn down into the heart and the body, which is the pollution of it. But it's an undecided kind of indeterminate space that separates the two levels. There are dimyonos, veheim haklipos hakoidmim lepri, and they are the husks that precede the fruit, meaning they are a fundamental functional part of the system that enables the fruit to be received. That's not an accidental thing that there's a klipa surrounding a fruit. The transition from klipa being this dark demonic force, Rahman al-Islam, and it becoming the covering of a fruit, which is a very refreshing notion and a necessity, and not such a difficult thing to think about, is a wonderful hamtaka in and of itself, obviously. But the dimyonos are the klipa that are koidem the pri, they're the indeterminate in-between space prior to the ability to reach up to the next level. The soiviv mes And like any level of noiga, and any level of concealment, and any level of chitzonius, ha'ilamos, which precedes the entrance into a new level of pnimius, that after the heights of the first level, I enter into this no man's land, so to speak, which feels like a degradation and a yerida gemura, but in truth, it's just the preparation for an ascent into a new level, because every movement upwards is going from a keser to a malchus, going from an ayin to an ani, and that's being thrown theoretically based on what we feel from the heights of the heights to the depths of the depths. But it's only when we relinquish the control on what we feel and we trust the process itself, we come to realize that this is an ascent rather than a descent. But what happens in the process of the ascent is that a person encounters those surrounding elements that surround the holiness and separate one level of holiness from the other in the secret of what the pasuk says, Saviv Rishayim Yisalechun. All of the dimyonos that surround my mind when I'm almost near a decision, specifically at the end of a process of thinking where I come to question my thinking the most, for example. And when a person detaches themselves and ascends upwards to the next level, and the language of ne'etak is not by chance, because we're talking about the hamshacha from arich anpin, which is the keser of the lower level, and going into the place of atik yoimin, which is the malchus of the higher level. Malchus and keser are always one and the same. They represent the bridge. They represent the beginning, the lowest part of the first level, and the beginning and the highest part of the next level. The lowest part of the higher level is the secret of Atik Yomin, the inner interiority of Keser. The externality of Keser, which is Arich Anpin, is the highest level of the next level. And so ne'etak, when a person is climbing from one level to another and detaching themselves from the keser of the lower level and trying to ascend to the malchus of the higher level and to reach the level of atik yoimin, of drawing the ancientness of days into the moichin, when a person ascends, as tzarich lo leilech delech eru habdinyonos kedei lahagia el hakadusha. By definition, a person has to process through those dimyonos. A person has to move upwards and enter back into the place of the dimyon, of the reality of the dimyon. So we see from here that the dimyon is a pre-existent reality that is a fundamental operational level within the system. It is, in fact, the bridge that enables a person to detach themselves from their prior way of thinking and to create a new framework. That is the possibility of imagination. That is what it means, subversively speaking, when Rav Yisroel Salanter writes that ha'adam that the person is enclosed and sturdy within their thought, but free in their imagination, implying the negative consequences of imagination, as the Rambam points out on one side of it. So the way that Hasidus reads it is that, yeah, a person is chashi b'demyono, there's a freedom of thought when a person enters into imagination, because I can now shift my orientation. I can think of myself differently. I can enter into the next level. But first and foremost, I have to imagine myself being possible of being at that level. And that's the necessary stage of moving into Kedusha. V'tekev k'sha'ola lamahadrega. And immediately when a person ascends up to a new level, azai nisayrin haklipos shebemadrega u'mesabe b'moiso. Immediately when I enter into a new level and I find myself by Malchus, all of the old stirrings of Dimyon are back because I've just transitioned through that stage of the in-between Dimyonos, because Dimyon is the in-between. Dimyon itself is the in-between. It's the connection between the neshama and the guf. It's the secret of mafli la'asos. It's the shirish of nevuah that I'm entering back in, and I'm mamela going to encounter the new difficulties, the new processes, the new imaginings that are surrounding the kedusha. And I have to break them down again and free myself from the imagination of the body in its addiction and the imagination of the emotions in its addiction to the emotion, and abstract myself back up to the freedom of the mind. I have to free myself. I have to break down that. That's the shamir. And to be the shamir worm for the new level, to break through the heart of stone, to prepare myself to ascend up to the potential of thought, and then to think, and then to finalize my thought on the matter, and then to allow that world to go up to the place that it goes up to in Nitzchias, and for me to encounter the new level. Vida she'ein shnei b'nei adam shavim ze lezeh. Kashem she Paneihem einam daim partzufeim einam daim zelazeh, kach daseim einam daim zelazeh. The parts of the face, no person is the same as another person in their thought and their emotions and their makeup and their conditioning. No two people are equal to one another. No two people are equal to one another. Klal gadol. Klal gadol, important klal when it comes to the associations with ways of thinking that categorize personality type. Like the Enneagram is an important tool for many people, but when it becomes a framework of really just looking at an archetype of a soul, so then we run the risk of blending together many, many individuals when each and every individual is their own stamp. And this archetypal psychology is not as much a Jewish idea as much as an idea that comes from the desire for idols and kind of actual objects rather than the unknowingness associated with more of the Jewish path of that I just don't know. I just don't know anything about myself, but all I know is that I'm not like anybody else. Each and every person is unique in their own experience. And from there, like Rav Soloveitchik points out in Lonely Man of Faith, a person can enter into community while still maintaining a sense in self. No two people are alike. This is from the hierarchical perspective. The chain-like process of the souls, where it's not better or worse, but each one is rooted in a particular part of the chain. And one soul becomes a garment for a soul that is more interior to it, and it conceals that soul and it reveals its own thing. And kacha, each and every level is levush, like nesting dolls to one another. One is lower, more exterior than the other. One is more interior than the other. And like we said, the panemius of the tachton, which is the keser of the lower world, becomes the malchus and the levush and the external level, or the external of the externality of the next level, meaning my deepest seichel hanikne of the previous level, that which I fundamentally know and will last with me forever, is niskala to be a havamina klape, the new level of hasaga. It's revealed to be a dimyon be'erech, the hasaga that I'm about to have. Nimsa, when a person wants to ascend upwards from the level that they are at, by definition, as a result of being in an extended chain of being, which is the neshama hakoilelis of Adam Arishon, where we're all nichlal b'skira achas. So when I have the desire to ascend, the level above me must ascend as well, because there needs to be a space for me. And my awakening to ascend from my seichel, to ascend back up to the next level, is also going to awaken the process of the level above me to move upwards. This is the Rashash and the Arizal in the process of Aliyas HaPartzufim. The entire reality is that there's a Shviras HaKelim, and the Kelim fall down with the Rapach Nitzoitzos, and through the process of Tikkun, through Mayin Nukvin, and the desire and the recognition of deficiency from below, and the Zichuch process and the clarification of the Nitzoitzos, we create the Olam HaTikkun Kavyachol. We create the Olam Hatikun, which is the world of the Partzufim, where all of the broken parts fulfill themselves, and the Tesfiros come back down to the Malchus that remained. And then there's a Hamshacha of the Yud Sfiros of Mahachadash that come, and there's an Olam Hatikun, and that's Mamshich, a new Ha'ara of Or Ein Sof Kavyachol, from the Pnimius of Adam Kadmon through the Zivug of the most innermost interiority of thinking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then only then reaching back to the place where it's fundamentally clear that a person knows absolutely nothing, and we ensure all of the halachos of knowing that we can't ever come to know anything, and we're mamshech down a new ha'ara, and we're mezavig all of the partzufim, from Atik all the way down to Zer Ampen and Malchus, and there's a hiskalis of Moichin Chadashin. That's the entire process. And so whenever, and this is happening each and every moment of a person's life, each and every split second, any moment that a person is aware is a nacha akva abiyah. A nacha akva abiyah, another world of an akva abiyah, another shvira, tikun, birur, hamshacha samoichin chadashin, zivug, all of the yichudim. And if I miss the previous moment, then I have a new opportunity this moment, and this moment has nothing to do with the next moment. It's just a ritzifus because of how speedy each and every moment is happening. Because we're mamish floating on the fin of the Leviathan. Unlike the revealed Torah, which says that the world stands upon the pillar of the tzaddik in a sturdy way. So in the Zohar HaKadosh, it says the entire world stands on the sanpir of the Leviathan. It stands resting on the fin of the Leviathan. The Leviathan is going very fast in the water. And those are the tzaddikim, the Rav Himnuna Saba, the Mittel Rebbe, the tzaddikim anistarim, all of the tzaddikim who descend down into Pnimius HaTorah are moving very, very quickly through the worlds. And there's a perpetual ascent. And very often that perpetual ascent brings with it a fundamental encounter with the repeated encounter of descent. There will always be an encounter with descent, not because I'm actually descending. Nothing is ever descending, but because descending is part of the ascent. It's Yerida Latachlis Aliyah, meaning to say that Yerida doesn't operate in a vacuum. Moichin Dekatnis don't operate in a vacuum. Dimyon doesn't operate in a vacuum. Nothing operates in a vacuum. Everything is part and parcel of the singular flow in which the Seder Hashtalshalis brings Metzias from Ayin into Yesh, Kavyachol, from nothing into something, and we are then tasked with the refinement of matter to bring it from something back into nothing, from Yesh back into Ayin, to be Megala, a higher level of Ayin itself. We'll go a little bit weiter, Chevra. I don't know. I don't know if we'll finish the Torah tonight. We might actually pause to go to the next Torah. But we'll see. We'll see where we go. Ezra Hashem. So Zok Rabbeinu. שאין שני בני אדם שווים זה לזה, כי כל הנשמות הם זה למעלה מזה, זה מלבוש לזה, פנימי של תחתון נעשה לבוש לחיצוניוס העליון. נמצא כשאחד רוצה לעלות למדרגה העליונה, אז ההולך ונעתק האדם העומד במדרגה העליונה. That the level above me, the parts of above me also begins to ascend upwards. והולך ונעתק למדרגה היותר עליונה. And each and every level begins to ascend upwards till the tippy top level enters into a place of unknown, uncharted territory of infinitude, which is just the chazar of the whole system back into the infinite. So any movement in the entire system pushes the entire system up to the very tippy top. Because it's impossible for two people to be standing on one level. This is perhaps pshat in Reish Pei Beis, that when I'm done somebody l'chavschus, I'm doing tshuva. Judging people positively for a person who judges negatively is tshuva. And when I do tshuva, I ascend up a level. And memela, if I'm ascending up a level, the person above me also has to ascend up a level. So I'm being magala a nekuda tova in them. Because when I'm mala a nitzotz of tova within myself by seeing good, memela, it mamish does awaken a positive point within each and every other person, because every neshama and nishmas yisrael is connected, and no two people can be in the exact same place. כי אפשר שיש שני אנשים במדרגה אחת, ואינו נעתק מהאדם העליון אלא הפנימי שלו. והחיצוניוס נשאר. וגם האדם שבמדרגה התחתונה אינו נעתק ועולה, אלא הפנימיוס. והפנימי של התחתון נעשה חיצוניוס לחיצוניוס העליון. So let's read this again, because this is fundamental when we understand the process of the Aliyas HaIlamos. When we're going from the Keser of the lower level back up to the Malchus of the higher level, where the highest level of the lower level becomes a Levush, becomes a Malchus to the higher level. And so we said that the Pnimius Tachton becomes the levush to the chitzonius and the chitzonius of the elyon. So it seems that there's actual movement of levels. And when there's an actual movement of levels, and the pnimius tachton and the highest level of the lower level is now ascending upwards, well, then the lower level is going to lose out theoretically. Because now its inner interiority and its darga of keser and its seichal hanikne is now going to be lost, and it's going to be revealed to be the dimyon of a previous level. That's a yeyush mindset, Rahman al-Islan. Because the truth of the matter is that what's going upwards is not the actual pnimius of the tachton, but only a part of the pnimius of the tachton is going up, and it becomes the levush of the higher level. But the pnimius of the tachton stays exactly where it is. The ascent of levels does not mean the movement of all levels from the place that they actually were. It just means the abstraction of the entire system up another level. But all of the positive benefits of the previous level that were nikna still remain. So let's read that in the words of Rabbeinu. Nimsa when a person has an awakening to ascend from one level to a higher level, the person above, the akva abiyah of that individual neshama also ascends upwards. And each and every one goes all the way up. So the ne'etak me ha'adam ha'elyon ela ha'pnimiyah shelo v'achitzonius nishar. Meaning to say, when the Adam HaElyon, when the Seichel HaNikne of the previous level goes up, it's only its Panemius that goes up. The Chitzonius is still the highest level of the lower level. That's Arich, that's the Chitzonius of Keser. It's only the inner interiority of Keser that goes up and it becomes the Atik. Does that make sense, Chavra? So let's read it inside. When there's an ascent of levels, yeah, we just spoke about how there needs to be an ascent of a level, and the highest level of the lower level, the panemius of the chitzonius is the lower level. The panemius of the chitzonius is the highest level of the lower level, the keser of the lower level, the seichel hanikne of the lower level. Yeah? When it comes to want to abstract itself and ne'atak itself from the highest level of the lower level and ascend upwards to a new level of hasaga, which by definition means entering into a place where it's only the malchus of the next level, where it becomes a dimyon again. So when we look at that, so we might think that by way of the ascent of the keser of the lower level, which is the pnimius of the chitzonius, then the chitzonius would lose out, because now it's losing its pnimius. But what Rabbeinu is pointing out, based on the Seder Ashtalshlus, is that when there's an ascent of levels, it doesn't mean that the pnimius and the chitzonius of the highest level from the lower level is now ascending upwards to become the lower level of the higher level, because all that is actually moving upwards is the pnimius of the highest level of the lower level. The pnimius of Keser, which is Atik, that's Ne'atak, that goes up, and it's now susceptible to becoming a new level. But the Shleimus that took shape in the previous level remains there. That's the chitzonius of Keser. Nonetheless, the chitzonius of the highest level of the lowest level of the higher world is the highest level of my world. Does that make sense?
Doesn't it go the Pnimius becomes Chitzonius? The Chitzonius becomes Pnimius of the higher level?
Yeah. The pnimius becomes the chitzonius of the higher level.
The Chitzonius of the lower level goes into the Pnimius of the higher level.
No,
Like
the chitzonius of the higher level becomes the pnimius of the lower level. And the
It
pnimius
comes down and it goes down.
that's in the process. That's in the process of coming down. But what Rabbeinu is describing here is the process of going up, when a process is being ne'atak itself. And so the highest level of the lower level, meaning the keser of the lower level, the keser of Olam Asiya, for example, which is Arich Anpin, it abstracts itself upwards and it becomes the malchus of the higher level.
The
And
Pnimius of the Chitzonius of the Malchus.
say again?
The Pnimius of the Chitzonius, or it doesn't matter.
It becomes the pnimius goes upwards and it becomes the malchus of
Malchus.
the malchus. Yeah. It becomes the malchus. So let's read this inside the words of Rabbi Nachman. V'hoilech v'ne'etak l'madrega hayoter alyona ki efshar sheyesh shnei anashim b'madrega achas ve'eno ne'etak me ha'adam ha'elyon ela ha'pnimius shelo v'hachitzonius nishar v'gam ha'adam sheb'madrega ha'tachtoina eno ne'etak ve'oile אלא הפנימיוס, והפנימיוס של התחתון נעשה חיצוניוס לחיצוניוס העליון. Like you said, it's the חיצוניוס of Malchus. Yeah? You with me, Chaver?
No, the premise of the Keser becomes Chetzonis of the Keser.
Yeah, becomes חיצוניוס of the Malchus.
No. But when we say that
Premise-
Zalios, when we say that Zalios Olamos, we're saying that it's becoming that, or it's just going to that place, and then technically that's also being Ola. So everything's pushing up a level.
So yeah. Meaning say the two but both options are always true, but say the two options again.
Meaning, is it becoming the Malchus of the upper Olam, or is it just going to the place of the Malchus of the upper Olam, and then the Malchus of the upper Olam also was Ola, so everything's getting pushed up.
Everything is getting pushed up, but every level that's moving upwards is meeting the
A new level.
Yes, the chitzon roishem,
Of
meaning
where it
usable
used to be
remainder
before it
of
went
the
up.
level that was there previously.
Okay, okay.
So every level is benefiting at every level.
It's like how Shabbos works?
How so? Meaning in terms of the aliyah sa'olamos of Shabbos?
Yes.
I mean, this is matbea bracha, ultimately. This is meaning the Rashash came along and took the entirety of the Arizal and basically said, let's apply this. Let's apply this. Let's go to the pre-Eitz Chaim, which is the pre is the ikar of the Eitz, meaning turning the Torah into tfilos. And from there, what the Rashash does is kind of fractalizes the entirety of the Eitz Chaim and applies it to each and every mitzvah, each and every bracha. The Torah's Chacham, the Talmud Mufak of the Rashash, comes and says, no, it's not only in every mitzvah and every bracha, or every tefillah, or every yontif, but it's mamish in every glance of the eye is another opportunity to be metakein this birur process within the ak and abiyah of this particular moment, of this particular day, of this particular week, of this particular month, and from the grandiosity of history to zoom out and really kind of see exactly where it stands according to the Mekubalim in the process of Partzufim. Meaning, like the Rebbe and the Beis Medrash, they send out there's kavanos that go to the 28th koach in terms of orienting oneself to what it said what the Rashash said about the Zman of the Shvira and abstracting back to exactly which bechina is being metukan today. And it's taking the extension of history very, very seriously because everything is ultimately one fell swoop, which is in truth just the machshava keduma, which is still, in the mind kavyachal, and it's never been thought, etc., etc. Chaver, with me on this? I think what we'll do is I think that I want to pause here because this is such an important Torah to me, and I think that we'll continue with it Amir Hashem on Thursday, and we'll go weiter into the element of the Medama, Be'ezras Hashem.